Dive. This is Deep Dive 41. And since it's Friday, here's the truth. Markets might claim to trade on fundamentals, but, by now, half the traders are probably already treating weekend plans. Still, intelligence doesn't clock out early, so let's dive in. Today is Friday, September 12th, 2025, and we're covering the intelligence brief for Thursday, September 11th. Our mission, as always, is to pull out the most important nuggets, the key insights from yesterday's intel. We want to give you that shortcut to being well-informed, with some surprising facts, context, but without all the noise. Okay, so let's unpack some deeply unsettling political events that really grabbed headlines yesterday. We have to start in the U.S. The shocking assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, shot dead during a university debate in Utah.
Just terrible news.
Yeah. And President Trump, he quickly lauded Kirk as a man of deep faith, urged Americans to recommit to free speech, democratic values. Even Australian Ambassador Kevin Rudd weighed in, condemning the violence. Shows the global impact, right?
Absolutely. These things don't happen in a vacuum.
The shooter is still at large. There's $1 million reward out. And interestingly, Utah authorities made a point of saying people assisting the suspect could come forward without fear of charges.
That's unusual. Trying to encourage someone to break ranks, maybe?
Could be. And NBC, Just Security, they're flagging this as part of, quote, rising incidents of political violence in the U.S.
Yeah, what's really striking about this, the Kirk assassination, it's not just the awful event itself. It's how it immediately plugs into this wider narrative of heightened domestic tension in the U.S.
Yeah.
It's such a violent display of polarization.
Right.
And it definitely shapes how the world sees American stability. For anyone watching global markets, this kind of event can easily trigger that risk-off sentiment. It hits investor confidence.
That's a really crucial point. It's not isolated. It's another data point, isn't it? In a worrying trend. Okay, moving from that domestic shock, let's shift focus. Another challenge to democratic norms, this time in Latin America. Brazil, a historic legal development there. The Supreme Court convicted former President Jair Bolsonaro for plotting a coup after his 2022 election loss.
A massive decision.
Huge. Most justices voted to convict. One acquitted, another abstained, but the conviction stands.
It really is monumental. This conviction, it sets a serious precedent in Latin America. It basically draws a clear line in the sand about holding former leaders accountable if they take anti-democratic actions. Now, sure, it could definitely stir up more anger among the far right in Brazil, but the bigger message, the one that echoes, is about reinforcing those institutional checks and balances. It tells you that even after periods of major political turmoil, the judiciary is willing and able to assert its independence. That's a powerful signal for the whole region.
Like an institution proving its resilience under pressure.
Exactly. It's an example of just that.
That contrast, resilience versus fragility, seems key here. Now let's turn to Europe. Regional security being tested there, too. Russian drones breached Polish airspace yesterday.
Not good.
Poland didn't waste any time. Requested an emergency UN Security Council meeting right away. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski called the incursion deliberate.
Yeah, this is definitely more than just, an accidental border slip-up. It reads like a deliberate provocation. Poland's immediate response, going straight to the UN Security Council, that really underscores how seriously NATO members view these kinds of actions. And then you have Germany pledging to reinforce NATO's eastern flank, doubling its fighter jets in the region. That's not just talk. It's a concrete step reflecting growing concerns about Russia's intentions about securing the alliance's borders. It's a definite tightening of the military posture.
Okay, so we've got these three events. Political violence in the U.S., a major court ruling in Brazil, an airspace breach in Europe. They seem quite separate on the surface. But what's the thread connecting them for you, for our listener, beyond just the individual headlines?
That's a really sharp observation, because there is a connection. What ties them together, I think, is this palpable sense of fragility. In democratic institutions, yes, but also in regional security across different continents. Each event, in its own way, is like a stress test, testing internal stability, testing international norms. The U.S. assassination points to those deep internal divisions kind of boiling over. The Brazilian conviction shows institutions pushing back, trying to reinforce themselves against anti-democratic forces. And the Polish airspace breach, well, that highlights the external pressures on sovereign borders. Taken together, they paint a picture of increased polarization and a world where established rules and norms are being actively challenged, and the responses are becoming more assertive too.
A world where norms are being tested. Okay. Before we continue, just a quick note for you. This deep dive is powered by NextSight. They're a global leader in investigations and intelligence. Their open source OSINT platform, Site Connect, it actually fuels these reports and it lets you tailor them to your specific needs. From really complex cross-border investigations to high-stakes corporate intelligence, their work is consistently on another level. It's fast, it's precise, and it's always fully corroborated. You can learn more at www.next-site.com. All right, let's shift focus again. Escalating geopolitical tensions, evolving alliances. This is where the global stage gets, well, really interesting. The Middle East naturally remains a critical flashpoint. Israel carried out an airstrike in Doha yesterday, specifically targeting Hamas negotiators.
Wow. Okay, that Israeli airstrike. It's not just a military move. That's a really high-stakes gamble. Diplomatically, the fallout could be huge. Hamas spokesperson Fawzi Barham, he immediately accused Israel of trying to torpedo the ceasefire talks, and he restated their demands. Israeli withdrawal, prisoner exchange, humanitarian aid, the usual points. Qatar, which is a crucial mediator in all this, condemned the strike, called it a violation of international law.
And the internal tensions are showing too, right?
Exactly. What's particularly complex is the tension within the alliances. You have Israeli PM Netanyahu warning that strikes could resume if Hamas leaders stay in Qatar. But then CBS News reported President Trump declared such an attack will not happen. That really lays bare the strain within that Israel-U.S. Gulf partnership. It raises the risk of a wider conflict, and it seriously complicates any hostage negotiations. Throws a wrench in the works.
A major wrench. And adding to this, Netanyahu also signed an agreement yesterday to expand settlements across the West Bank, including the highly sensitive E1 corridor. That's the area near Jerusalem whose development is seen by many as basically cutting off a future Palestinian state.
Yeah, E1 is hugely controversial.
And he also declared, controversially, there will never be a Palestinian state. The plan involves almost $1 billion in infrastructure and housing.
That move on the E1 corridor plus Netanyahu's statement,
Yeah.
that's really pushing the boundaries. It's a direct challenge to the whole two-state solution concept.
Yeah.
And it carries significant international consequences. It risks isolating Israel even further. You're seeing European states, for instance, actively talking about recognizing Palestine now. Geopolitically, these actions just add more instability to the region. They make future peace talks even harder. It impacts diplomatic ties, could spark more unrest. It's playing with fire.
Definitely. And while the Middle East is grappling with all this, Europe is making this strong push for defense autonomy. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen urged Europe to, quote, fight for survival. She emphasized EU self-reliance, talked about creating a drone alliance.
A drone alliance. Interesting.
Yeah, and EU Council President Antonio Costa echoed this, stressed unity, continued support for Ukraine, and argued for a long-term EU budget specifically for defense.
Right. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, what we're seeing is this global reevaluation of alliances, of defense strategies. Europe's drive for autonomy, especially creating a drone alliance, it signals a clear shift. They want to strengthen their own regional bloc, rely less on traditional partners, maybe the U.S. It's not just about buying more military kit. It's about reshaping global power dynamics. You see nations taking unilateral actions, like the Israeli strike, while also trying to strengthen their own regional security groups. It points towards a more multipolar world, perhaps, where Europe wants to stand more on its own militarily.
That's a compelling take. But I wonder, is it genuine autonomy? Or are nations just kind of realigning within existing power structures, but maybe with new priorities?
Let's look at the Asia-Pacific. We're seeing evolving partnerships there, too. Australia signed on to the new Pacific Resilience Facility. That's a regional financial institution owned by the Pacific Islands Forum, designed specifically to provide rapid climate disaster financing. Solomon Islands PM Jeremiah Manley really highlighted how crucial this is.
You raise an excellent point about autonomy versus realignment. That's the key question. In the Pacific, that resilience facility, that looks like a powerful example of regional self-sufficiency for a critical issue. Climate change. It's about empowering those island nations, giving them direct access to funds when disaster hits. Much needed. Meanwhile, though, under the IUK's Pact, you have South Australia signing a deal with Rolls-Royce to develop a nuclear propulsion workforce. Now, that's a clear strategic alignment with the US and the UK. But it also significantly boosts Australia's own long-term defense capabilities. So it's both alignment and strengthening self-capacity. Right, so seeing both things happening at once, self-reliance and strategic alliances. And on the research side, there were exploratory talks launched between Australia and the EU. about Australia possibly joining Horizon Europe, the EU's big research funding program.
Uh-huh.
Apparently, this move is largely driven by cuts in U.S. funding and also domestic budget constraints for Australian universities.
Exactly. That last point about Horizon Europe is really telling, I think. It shows Australia diversifying its research partnerships, looking beyond those traditional ties with the U.S. because, well, the funding situation is changing. It's a pragmatic realignment, trying to ensure continued innovation, continued research output. And it reflects a global trend, really. Countries seeking a wider range of partners based on mutual benefit, not just historical alliances. It's about leveraging every available avenue for growth and stability.
Makes sense. And as you listen, remember that NextSight's capabilities extend well beyond just reporting. They're OSINT specialists and investigative teams. They connect the dots across borders, validate sources, map relationships. They turn fragmented signals into actionable strategy. Okay, let's pivot now. The global economy. Feels like a fascinating mix right now, doesn't it? Growth in some areas, volatility in others, almost contradictory. What's the most surprising economic development from yesterday that caught your eye, and why?
Surprising. For me, I think it has to be JP Morgan's announcement, a 20% expansion of its corporate banking workforce in Asia Pacific. What's surprising is their reasoning. They're citing digital innovation and intra-Asia trade as key drivers, even with China's economic headwinds being so visible. It signals a pretty strong long-term bullish view on that region's growth potential, despite the obvious challenges in China right now.
That is a strong vote of confidence, isn't it, despite the current climate?
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that optimism, India's rupee. It fell to a record low yesterday, 88.44 per US dollar. Yeah. Apparently, after new U.S. tariffs kind of spooked investor confidence, led to $11.7 billion in investor outflows. The Reserve Bank of India had to step in, sell dollars to try and slow the decline.
Right. That rupee drop really highlights how immediately global trade policy can impact emerging markets. New tariffs, even if they don't directly target India, can trigger that flight of capital. Investors look for what they see as safer havens. The Reserve Bank's intervention was necessary, absolutely, to prevent an even sharper fall, but it just underscores how vulnerable economies are to these external shocks, these shifts in investor mood. Even a fast-growing economy like India.
Okay, turning our attention to Africa now. South Africa's online retail market. It's projected to hit R$130 billion by 2025. That would be about 10% of total retail. Big jump.
Huge jump.
Boosted by grocery apps, fast fashion platforms, and international players like Amazon and Shein are jumping in, spurring competition.
Yeah, this is a really remarkable growth story unfolding there. It speaks volumes about the rapid digital transformation happening across the continent and the untapped potential of its consumer markets. You know, when global giants like Amazon and Shein enter, it doesn't just validate the market. It also accelerates innovation, ramps up competition. Ultimately, that's good for consumers. It's a powerful sign of economic dynamism.
Definitely something to watch. And from a global trade perspective, China, they reported 3.5% year-on-year growth in foreign trade. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Lin Jin, emphasized stronger ties with the EU, ASEAN, and BRICS.
Diversification strategy.
Exactly. He also defended China's sovereignty over Scarborough Shoal and criticized Mexico's proposed tariffs on Chinese goods as protectionist.
Right. China's trade figures, even if they seem modest at 3.5%, are pretty significant given the current global economic climate. And that emphasis on strengthening ties with the EU, ASEAN, BRICS, it shows a clear strategy, doesn't it? Diversifying trade relationships, building alternative economic blocs, especially with ongoing trade tensions with the U.S. Their stance on Scarborough Shoal and the criticism of Mexican tariffs, that underlines their firm position on sovereignty and their vocal opposition to any protectionist measures hitting their exports. It's a strong projection of both their economic and political strategy.
But these economic transitions, they aren't always smooth sailing, are they? Look at Colombia. Plans to transition coca-growing regions, specifically in the Cañón del Limqué, into legal economies. Well, they seem to be faltering.
Yeah, it's a tough situation.
Rebels from the Estado Mayor Central, that's a major dissident FARC faction, they still control key areas. Community leaders are complaining about state abandonment. Promised state investments just haven't materialized.
This is such a classic example of, good intentions hitting really harsh realities on the ground. The failure to actually secure those regions from groups like the Estado Mayor Central, combined with the lack of those promised state investments, it creates a vacuum. And that vacuum just perpetuates the illegal economies. And this failure has real, tangible consequences. It puts crucial U.S. funding for peace initiatives at risk. And it fundamentally undermines President Petro's whole peace agenda. It's a stark reminder that peace building needs sustained security and economic commitment, not just policy announcements.
Absolutely. Beyond economics, we also saw some critical governance and security issues pop up yesterday. Nepal's Prime Minister, KP Sharma Oli, was ousted amid protests. The army is apparently negotiating with demonstrators over an interim leader.
Wow.
Protesters were demanding Judge Sushila Karki for the role. And in South Sudan, Vice President Riek Machar was charged with treason and crimes against humanity, suspended by President Kiir.
Oh, dear. That's deeply worrying.
Yeah, deepening political instability, raising fears of a resurgence of conflict.
These events in Nepal and South Sudan, they really show a severe breakdown in political stability and governance. In Nepal, ousting a PM amidst protest points to deep public dissatisfaction, a fragile political system where the military often has to step in as mediator. Not ideal. South Sudan's situation is even more alarming. Charging a vice president like that, it threatens to reignite a conflict that's already caused so much devastation. Both situations highlight the immense challenges in just establishing and maintaining stable governing structures in certain regions, often fueled by these intense power struggles and a real lack of institutional trust.
And one final security brief. Back in Europe, an investigation uncovered a spy ring. They captured a former deputy head of Moldovan intelligence accused of spying for Belarus. And it highlights alleged ties between the Belarusian KGB and Russian services.
Right. This specific incident is a good reminder that, traditional espionage proxy activities, they're still very much active, even beneath the headlines about drones and economic shifts. It underscores that connection between Russian and Belarusian intelligence services and their ongoing efforts to exert influence, to destabilize neighboring countries, even within Europe. It's that subtle, persistent form of geopolitical maneuvering that keeps security services across the continent constantly on high alert.
That is a lot to take in about global stability governance. So how do countries manage this tension between embracing digital innovation and global trade, like we saw with JP Morgan in Asia, or South Africa's e-commerce boom, while also grappling with these deep-seated internal conflicts like in Colombia or external security threats like that Moldovan spy ring? It feels like a constant high-wire act.
It absolutely is a high-wire act, no question. The core challenge is that economic progress, digital transformation, they need stability. They need trust. But those very things are constantly being eroded by internal conflicts, political instability, external threats. So countries are forced to prioritize. Yeah. Often they have to allocate resources to security that could otherwise be fueling development. It's a tough trade-off. The most successful nations generally manage to build resilient institutions that can both foster innovation and effectively counter threats, kind of creating a virtuous cycle. But as we've seen from today's brief, that's incredibly difficult to achieve in practice.
Indeed. Okay, shifting gears slightly. Beyond the headlines of power and markets, there are vital efforts happening, addressing climate challenges, humanitarian needs. We mentioned the Pacific Resilience Facility earlier, but it really bears repeating. Australia is signing on to this treaty. It's designed to simplify access to international funding for Pacific Island states facing truly devastating climate disasters.
Yeah, that facility is potentially a game changer for the Pacific.
Yeah.
Climate change isn't just an issue for these islands, it's an existential threat. And traditional aid mechanisms, let's be honest, are often slow, bureaucratic, too slow for rapid onset disasters. So by creating this regional, more nimble institution, the idea is to ensure funds can be deployed quickly when a disaster strikes, building resilience right there within the affected communities.
Yeah.
It's trying to be proactive, not just reactive.
A much-needed approach. And closer to home for Australia, the New South Wales government approved the Great Koala National Park. This is a massive effort, protecting over 12,000 koalas, more than 100 other species, too.
That's fantastic news.
Environment Minister Penny Sharp called it a once-in-a-generation decision to ensure future generations can actually see koalas outside of zoos.
This is a really significant conservation win. Seriously. In a world where biodiversity is declining so rapidly, dedicating such a huge area to protect an iconic species like the koala, plus all those other species, it sends a powerful message. It shows a commitment to environmental stewardship. Trying to balance economic development with preserving natural heritage, it's an investment in the planet's future.
Absolutely. And on the humanitarian front, the Australian Defence Force launched a national blood donor drive. Brigadier Tony Bushby emphasized how critical donated blood and plasma are, both for battlefield evacuations and for civilian healthcare. Mobile units are visiting army bases to meet the high demand.
Yeah, this ADF initiative, while it might be focused initially on national defense needs, it has a much broader humanitarian impact. Blood and plasma are just indispensable. Battlefields, civilian hospitals everywhere. It highlights how even military organizations contribute to public health, public welfare, underscoring that critical, often unseen infrastructure of care that supports society. It's fundamental.
True. And globally, the UN has, so it's clear, even amidst all the geopolitical shifts, the economic turbulence, critical work continues, protecting vulnerable people, protecting biodiversity. It's a testament to those ongoing efforts, often happening away from the daily news spotlight. Okay, let's bring all these threads together now. What are the big, so what moments for you from this deep dive? What should our listener really focus on?
Well, several correlations definitely jump out. First, that immediate link between political events and financial markets. The Kirk assassination, the Bolsonaro conviction,
Yeah.
they underscore that democratic fragility we talked about. And they often trigger that risk-off sentiment among investors. We saw it directly with India's rupee falling. So what this means for you is monitoring political developments isn't just about staying informed on current affairs.
Yeah.
It's actually a critical part of assessing market volatility.
Right. Politics and markets are intertwined.
Deeply. Second, geopolitics is significantly reshaping both energy markets and defense strategies. That's clear. Israel's strike in Doha, the West Bank's settlement expansion, they could heighten Middle East instability. That potentially drives up oil prices, boosts defense stocks. Europe's push for defense autonomy, that drone alliance idea, plus a UKIS. It all clearly signals increased military spending, more procurement of drones, a booming cybersecurity sector. This isn't just short-term, it looks like a long-term investment trend.
Okay. Defense and energy definitely impacted. What else?
Third, climate and resilience financing. It's opening up new investment avenues. The Pacific Resilience Facility, Australia's Koala Park. They signal increased government and institutional spending on climate adaptation, disaster response infrastructure, renewables, conservation. This creates real opportunities for businesses and organizations working in those sectors.
New avenues for green or resilient investment. Got it.
Fourth, digital commerce. It continues its rapid expansion, especially in emerging markets like South Africa. That suggests strong opportunities in African fintech, logistics, e-commerce infrastructure. But, and this is important, this growth is happening against that backdrop of persistent internal conflicts, governance challenges. Think Colombia, South Sudan.
Yeah.
It's a reminder for businesses. You have to rigorously assess geopolitical and operational risks before expanding. Growth potential doesn't negate risk.
Opportunities, but with significant caveats.
Exactly. And finally, we're seeing this clear trend of diversification in research funding and supply chains. Australia talks about joining Horizon Europe. That highlights universities actively seeking alternatives to traditional funding sources, like the U.S. It suggests a broader need for institutions, for companies to diversify their research collaborations, and also to develop contingencies for things like currency swings and tariffs, like we saw hitting the Indian rupee to protect their operations.
Diversification as a resilient strategy makes sense. Those are fantastic connections, really paints a comprehensive picture. So for you, our listener, here are some practical takeaways, some recommended actions from today's deep dive. First, monitor political risk. Investors, you really need to closely track political developments in the U.S., Brazil, Poland. Governments, meanwhile, need to enhance security for public figures, invest in civic education to try and mitigate extremism.
Crucial first step.
Second, position for defense and cyber growth. Europe's drive for defense autonomy, Israel's security posture, it all points to increased military spending. Drones, cybersecurity, anti-drone systems. This is an area ripe for investment and strategic focus.
Definitely a growth sector.
Third, leverage climate resilience funds. If you're an entity operating in the Pacific, actively seek partnerships with that Pacific Resilience Facility. Governments, NGOs, you should be proposing integrated projects, infrastructure, renewables, disaster preparedness all rolled together.
Tap into those new funding streams.
Fourth, support inclusive humanitarian aid. It's critical to encourage the Taliban to lift restrictions on women aid workers. That ensures effective disaster response. Donors, especially, should attach conditions to funding requiring equal employment for women and then actually monitor that it happens.
Accountability is key there.
And finally, fifth, diversify research funding and supply chains. Universities, companies actively pursue those EU research programs like Horizon Europe. Businesses, you need robust contingency plans for currency swings, for tariffs, to protect your operations and your global reach.
Build that resilience.
Exactly. So, considering everything we've unpacked today, from these rising political tensions, shifting economic landscapes, to the global humanitarian efforts, there's a thought for you. How do you think this intricate web of daily events will reshape long term international strategies, particularly as nations try to balance their own national interests with these shared global challenges? Something to mull over. That concludes the Thursday, September 11th, 2025 Intelligence Brief, brought to you on this Friday, September 12th edition of The Deep Dive. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Spotify. Share your thoughts, like, comment, spread the word, stay informed, stay sharp, and may your Friday close stronger than the week's last trading bell.